What is going on, gunfighters? I thought today would be a good episode if we talked about the forgotten guns of Ruger. Now, Ruger's got some staples in the firearms world, some meat and potatoes guns, but they also have some that have kind of fallen by the wayside for whatever reason. Obscure to all but the most hardcore gun nerds or Ruger aficionados. So I thought it would be fun to talk about those guns today. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics the right way, with God at the center, biblical Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Bio bullet points in the show notes. All right, with that, I'm blessed to serve you today as host. Let's get into it. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is one that came up recently. I talked about it when I did Ruger 1022 variants, and that's the 1022 Magnum. Yeah, they made a 1022 and a 22 Magnum. It didn't last very long, not long at all. But it is a variant that's out there, so that is one that exists. Now, there is also one, the 9622. You might think that Ruger's just getting into the lever action game when they bought Marlin, but the 9622 was a lever action that looks very much like the Ruger 1022, but is in fact a lever action. That's a pretty cool gun. What I think is even cooler is they made it in a 44 Magnum. It looks almost identical to a Ruger 1022 except for a small lever that hangs down, but kind of same form factor, same sleek stock, same, kind of compact nature, in a 44 Magnum, the 9644. That is a super, super cool variant. I think highly coveted and sought after. It also has a rotary magazine, of which is kind of one of the things the Ruger 1022 is known for, but fantastic, cool gun. And I think worth mentioning here, forgotten to all but the most hardcore aficionados. A lot of people know about the Ruger Deerfield carbines. We're not going to talk about it. A lot of people know about those semi-auto 44 Magnums, but I don't know if a lot of people know that they made a lever action 44 Magnum, and not like the Marlins. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but these are a lot sleeker, more svelte. You don't have to deal with a hammer. You don't have to deal with all the foibles that come along with 1870s technology, tubular magazine. If you want a lever action for practical reasons and you come across one of these, light, sleek, small form factor, you can mount decent optics on them. So they're a good option if you, again, come across one. On that note, kind of similar, Ruger's kind of known for these light, handy carbines. I don't think I have to tell anybody about the Mini 14, of 80s action era fame. Those are great guns. There's nothing wrong with the Mini 14. I actually ran one as a law enforcement officer, maybe, one of the last ones to do that. I can't imagine they're still in service many other places. But they're a good little carbine. A lot of people know about the Mini 30. I've talked about the Mini 30 quite a bit here. A lot of people that are AK aficionados, if you look at the price of what a decent AK costs nowadays, this wasn't always the case, but a decent AK now I think is going to cost you $1,000 to $3,000, minimum $1,000. Unless you just come across a screaming deal somewhere. Well, a brand new Mini 30 in the same cartridge that's still a piston gun, you can get it in stainless steel that, is a shrunk down M1 Garand or M14 action. I don't think anybody complains about their reliability. And you can mount optics much better than you can on an AK-47. I know they can be done, but not as well. Why wouldn't you just get a Mini 30? Those are fantastic. Well, both of those, I think, are not obscure, even if they're not well-known or not a mainstay. But did you know they made a Mini in 6.8 SPC? I don't think many people remember that, but they did. There was a time when, the military was looking at other options to replace the 223, and one of the options that caught steam for a while and is still a very good round, a good intermediate cartridge, is the 6.8 SPC. Unlike the 6.8 that we see now, the 6.8 by 51, which is a full-powered rifle cartridge, this one was an intermediate rifle cartridge. So intermediate power, I would argue better ballistics for a lot of things than either the 223 or the 7.62 by 39. Now, it's not as common as either, but it's a good ballistic round. If you're a reloader or you just don't mind, that obscurity of the round, the 6.8 SPC has a lot of merit. It's a good round. It'll fit into a 223 size action, which is why it was chambered in the Mini. And there was a time when people were really thinking it was going to catch on. So there have been Minis made in 6.8 SPC. It's a cool round. It's a cool gun. If you wanted something like a light handy carbine for deer, for hogs, there's nothing wrong with the Mini 30. They're fantastic. Nothing wrong with the 7.62 by 39. But I think better ballistically would be the 6.8. And a lot of people may not know that Ruger made one in a 6.8. Also fairly obscure, Ruger also made a target version of the Mini 14. Now, the Mini 14 has the early ones anyway, not the new ones, but the earlier ones, like the 80s, 90s ones, those were known for being inaccurate, not something you want to be known for. However, the target version was their attempt to make a very accurate Ruger Mini 14. Now, I can't attest to how accurate they are because I never owned one, but I have to assume if they made it and put it out on the market, it was fairly accurate. So if you see one of those, kind of different looking, kind of a heavier barrel profile, and I don't believe they had iron sights, but kind of made for accuracy. So the Ruger Mini Target is also a variant that is out there that I think is obscure to most people, but kind of cool if you come across one. Now, the next one of my favorite shotguns of all time. And you might think, Ruger shotgun, what are you talking about? Well, Ruger actually made a couple of different shotguns. They made the Gold Label, which is a side-by-side, which is cool in its own thing. But the one that I like, they made a Ruger Red Label, over and under. And one of the things Ruger is known for, stainless steel. They made an over and under shotgun in stainless steel. Man, those are cool. They're kind of coveted. They're kind of sought after, the Ruger Red Labels, and especially the stainless steel ones. I like to hunt in harsh conditions. Not because I like harsh conditions, because I like to hunt, when I can get it. And also, I just like to be out there, good weather or bad weather. And I like the fact that it's stainless steel. I like stainless steel firearms. That Ruger Red Label over and under stainless steel, just a phenomenal gun. I don't think anybody complained about the Ruger Red Labels in quality or anything. I think they were just expensive. But Ruger Red Label, stainless steel over and under. Unless you're like an over and under guy or, again, a Ruger aficionado, you might not know about the Gold Label or the Red Label. But to me, that Red Label stainless steel is one of the coolest shotguns ever made. Just fantastic guns. I think they made them in different gauges. The only stainless ones I believe I've ever seen have been in 12 gauge. I don't know if they made the stainless in other gauges, but just a really cool shotgun, rugged, reliable, robust stainless steel. How cool is that? Now, you're probably aware that Ruger makes some decent budget ARs. Like, I often mention the Smith & Wessons, those are good. I often mention PSA, those are good. But Ruger also makes some good entry-level ARs, some good like workhorse, common man, working man's AR-15s. Ruger does. But did you know their first AR, when they came out with an AR, it was a piston gun. It wasn't that long ago, I want to say early aughts. Piston ARs were all the rage. You can still find a couple of good piston ARs out there being made, but it never took over, like it never became the bulk of the market. But when Ruger came to market with their first AR, that was when the piston gun was in full swing. Their first AR was a piston gun, and it's a good one. It's a bit heavy, but if you want an AR, a good American-made AR, and you want a piston gun, rugged, reliable, all the things, common AR magazines, you don't want to have to deal with, going to a Mini. You want a lot of the commonality of an AR platform, but you want a piston gun. I don't think these are highly coveted, and they're a good, rugged firearm. So if you see one, it's called the Ruger SR-556. You can kind of tell because you can see the piston system on the front. Now, I think this came out also when the tactical cheese grater, the quad rail, was in vogue. It was just the best thing they had at the time before M-Lock and Key Mod and those other things. So it's going to be a bit heavy. It's going to be a bit chunky. But if you want a rugged, robust, piston AR, be a great truck gun, would be a great harsh condition AR, the SR-556 piston AR by Ruger. And I don't think they're highly coveted. If you see one, I don't think they're going to cost much more than a DI gun. You know, they might cost more than, you know, something like a daily deal PSA gun. But I can't remember them ever being highly sought after. And they're good guns. So if you see one, you want one, get one. It would be a good choice, especially if you're like, I don't know if I want DI. I heard NOM, they weren't so good, and this thing and that thing, or I hate cleaning guns. Piston ARs are way easier to clean than direct impingement ARs. If you want a piston AR and you like Ruger, this is a good option. Okay. When you guys think of Ruger, you think of many things probably, but you likely don't think of cartridges. Like when you think of, you know, Winchester, you might think 270 Winchester. When you think of Remington, you might think 280 Remington or the 44 Remington Magnum. When you think of different firearms manufacturers, you may think of cartridges. Probably not with Ruger. The one you may think of would be the 375 Ruger, but that's a small niche. I mean, that's an African cartridge, dangerous game cartridge, maybe grizzly bear Alaska cartridge. The 375 Ruger basically duplicates the 375 H&H in a regular sized action. And that's cool, but that's a pretty small niche. Most of us aren't running around hunting, coastal brown bears in Alaska or dangerous game in Africa. That's a pretty niche market. And a lot of those guys that do that want tradition, so they want the traditional 375 H&H. 375 Ruger's a good cartridge. I don't think it's forgotten, though. In that niche, it's fairly well known. How about the 480 Ruger? If you're just a big bore revolver dude, you think revolvers start at 44 Magnum. Anything other than that is like a plinking training gun. Like if it's not 44 Mag or better, just why even bother? Like Dirty Harry was marginal as far as manliness goes in the revolver realm. If that's your kind of view, you might know about the 480 Ruger. If not, you may not know about it. Big bore revolvers. You generally think of 44 Magnum. You generally think of 45 Colt and 454 Casull. People know about that one. If you really want the big bore, you're going to know about the 500 Smith & Wesson. You're going to know about, the 460 Smith & Wesson, more powerful but smaller bore. People that I don't think get those to be practical. I think they get those to show off what they have. So a lot of them go with the 500 Smith & Wesson and a crew-serve revolver, a revolver that's way too big to be practical. But there's a happy medium in there. The 480 Ruger. It's a fantastic cartridge. It's got impressive numbers. It's a true big bore. It is definitely in between and more powerful than a 44 Magnum, and still in a practical size gun. You're not going to have to go up to like a Smith & Wesson X-frame. Smith & Wesson X-frames are exquisitely made guns, but they're huge. You could get a 480 Ruger in a practical size gun, either for like a defensive, bear size small revolver, which I'm not saying I'm for that concept, but it's a good option up to hunting size. If you're a reloader, you probably don't want to spend the money on the ammo if you're not, unless you just don't care. But the 480 Ruger is a good viable option. It's a good in-between something like a, 45 Colt, 454 Casull, and a 500 Smith & Wesson. Ruger is kind of known for their big bore revolver, so I'm not going to talk about those here. Both the single actions and double actions, the Black Hawks, the Red Hawks, the Super Red Hawks. But you may not know that they make them in a 480 Ruger. So if you see that cartridge, it's a Ruger cartridge, it's a good cartridge, and it's one of the kind of forgotten big bore revolvers. So I just wanted to mention that. On the complete other end of this, the Ruger Wrangler came out. It's pretty popular on the market. It's a good, cheap, single-action 22 plinker. That's not what I'm going to talk about. The Ruger Bearcat makes that thing look like a big bore gun in comparison to size. It still shoots 22 long rifle, but the Ruger Bearcat is tiny. It's like teeny tiny. So if you wanted a small, like 22, just walk around gun for walking around in the woods, just plinking, having fun, or a kid's first 22, these are tiny. They're adorable. They're cute little 22s, made very well. They're going to cost you more than a Wrangler. There's also the Ruger Single 6. But this, again, the Bearcat, I think is forgotten about. It's a smaller frame. It's a smaller gun. It's a teeny tiny little single action 22. So if that's what you're looking for, it's quite a bit smaller than the others in its class. It's quite a bit smaller than, a Heritage Rough Rider or a Ruger Wrangler or even a Ruger Single 6. It's a small, tiny little gun There's been several models over the years. I think they still make them. I could be wrong about that, but the Ruger Bearcat is just a teeny tiny, kind of forgotten Ruger. Now, one that, if you were around in the 80s and 90s, you may know about it. You may know that it was in the handgun trials that lost to the Beretta, but many other people will not know about this gun. It is the Ruger P89. There are some other variants, but the P89 is probably the most well-known of the obscure model of this. Kind of cool as like a prepper gun, a survival gun, a hardcore, harsh conditions gun. It's aluminum frame, I believe aluminum frame, maybe stainless steel frame. But it's a metal-on-metal gun, semi-auto, big, chunky, robust. Consider it like, made kind of like a GP100 or a Red Hawk, like a big, beefy, overbuilt gun, but in a semi-auto. These have become kind of obscure and kind of a collector's item, but not so much that they're prohibitively expensive. They're big, they're chunky, but they're a cool gun, and I think they're largely forgotten today. Again, if you were around in the 80s and 90s, you probably know about them, but guys that have gotten into guns when everything was a Glock 19 and an AR-15, they probably don't know a lot about a Ruger P89. They're a really cool gun. So I think that's going to round out the lineup of pretty cool, obscure Rugers. Did I forget one? Is there some even so obscure that I forgot about them? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Pretty cool. Not sponsored by Ruger, but Ruger is a good company that's making guns in America that makes them, I think, for the blue-collar working man, makes some really good guns. A lot of their guns are not obscure. A lot of their guns are fantastic and well-known, like a Ruger LCP or the Ruger American Gen 2 or, the GP100 or the Red Hawk. Those are all really good guns. For good reason, they're popular. But they made some really good guns that aren't popular for whatever reason. Anyway, with that, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do. Your tactical tip of the day. Whether you're talking about woods environments, outside environments, a kind of thing that you can do to up your situational awareness is when you are walking around a new environment. Let's say you go into a room, even if you've been there 20 times, even if you've been there almost every day, other than like your living room or your personal bathroom, you probably know everything in there. But next time you're in like your bathroom at work or, some different room at the gym or something, or the Walmart you frequent often, try and notice something you've never noticed before. Maybe it's screws in the wall from a fixture that's no longer there. Or maybe it's, a fire extinguisher, which it would be good to know in an emergency. It's better to know where it already is and try and find it. The AED, the first aid kit. These are important things. But just looking for something, whether it's important or not, is a good exercise in situational awareness. So I think that's a good tactical tip for the day. And then that will bring us to the tactical verse of the day. The tactical verse of the day. A beautiful verse. If I say, my foot slips, your mercy, O Lord, will hold me up. In the multitude of my anxieties within me, your comfort delights my soul. I don't think that needs any comment from me. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.